Sometimes you find something in a video game that makes you think, yeah, I need to destroy this immediately. I think this would make good fertilizer. This is why today we're diving into the top 10 craziest discoveries in video games that were never meant to be found. Part 5. And as always, if you want to support the channel and see more content like this, as well as other future projects, the best way to do that is to subscribe down below. Thank you again everyone for your amazing continued support. Horizon Zero Dawn. Thanks to V for submitting this discovery on the Oddheader Discord. Horizon Zero Dawn is one of my favorite games, which seems like every time I try to cover a discovery it ends up getting removed from the game. Redditor Portport, however, recently discovered something in the game that appears to have escaped removal, as he recently uncovered it a couple months ago, 5 years after the game's release, despite it possibly being in the game even far before that, as Portport was using a cheap menu mod with the PC port of the game when they found a player body variant named Replace Me, which when they swapped it out with Aloy's character model they got, what the duck? What appears to be a duck head on a human body wearing a sandwich board that reads, "This is a legacy character, please replace me." Questions? Contact Duckman at GorillaGames.com. A lot of questions, actually. And that's exactly what I did. I guess now we can only wait to find out what the mystery behind Duckman really is. Though to be honest, unless Duckman is some sort of Gorilla developer's nickname, I'm not expecting much for an email made for whatever the hell this is supposed to be. At this point, this is probably a discovery we're not going to quack. Marvel's Spider-Man. Marvel's Spider-Man is the 2018 PlayStation 4 exclusive by Insomniac Games. Recently released for the PlayStation 5 and announced for Windows release later this year, where players can take on what's been considered the most exciting Spidey simulator to date. That is, if the game actually lets you play as him. As Zachar was playing the game when he loaded up a save and found instead of playing as the web slinger himself, he was a tiny white cube, who was actually still able to sling web and kick a decent amount of ass, despite playing as the never-before-seen Spideyverse character, Piece of Tofu Man. Of course, you would think by the time Spider-Man Miles Morales came out 2 years later in 2020, Insomniac would have fixed the problem. But this time, instead of letting Jonathan Mercado on YouTube play as Miles Morales, he instead found he was a brick. Fortunately, Minky Juice FC on Reddit had no problem with Spider-Man loading into his copy of the original game, except when he wasn't supposed to at all, as when Minky Juice FC loaded this cutscene that was supposed to feature Mary Jane, they instead got a very curvaceous Spider-Man. The master web slinger became a master hip swayer.
Mary Jane Watson, I am covering the Fisk Estates. Hello.
Of course, in actuality, the scene likely failed to load the Mary Jane model and slipped in the default Spider-Man model with the same animations, but... Oh, sorry, I just got distracted for a second. Damn, that ass Spider-Man. Battlefield 2042. Battlefield 2042 is the newest release in EA's first-person shooter series, released in November 2021 that many fans have decried as the most disappointing installment yet, being one of the worst reviewed games on Steam despite also being one of the most popular. 2042 actually released with fewer features than previously seen and was a glitchy mess full of problems caused by countless server issues and an unfinished product. In other words, the whole game looks like it wasn't meant to be found, at least not in this state, though that's not to say it's not amusing, making for a plethora of discoveries never meant to be found. Some of the oddities include countless buildings lacking collision, getting killed in the opening cutscene before the game even begins, accidentally grappling onto a tornado in the background before getting killed for leaving the area, as well as an unnerving camera pan underground revealing a horrifying cluster of ducks floating underneath the map. What the f***? More ducks? If there's anything to give developer DICE credit for 2042 though, is their ability to put so many penguins in the game, complete with working waddle and sliding animations and everything. You know, this almost makes up for things. Though Do9K on Reddit found you can actually use the engineer repair tools on the penguins, complete with a repair status bar that refills and everything. Come on, couldn't even get the penguins right? Super Paper Mario. Thanks to TestCar2 for submitting this mystery through the Oddheader Reddit. Super Paper Mario is the third installment in the Paper Mario series, originally released in North America, Japan, Europe, and Australia in 2007, and eventually dropping in South Korea 2 years later in 2009. Of course, you're probably wondering why I mentioned that, and it's because it was revealed for the first time in 2018 on the YouTube channel Game Intis that the South Korean version of the game, despite being a later release, contained more data in its files than the original game, and it turned out it was because it had a number of unused areas that didn't appear in the final game. Most of the levels were entirely unfinished and appeared to have a number of interesting differing styles from what actually appears in Super Paper Mario, such as this yarn-styled area or this tiny island environment. Strangest though may be map KRI05.bin, which for some reason has this strange standing formation of feline folk whose purpose remains entirely unknown. It's believed that cats could have been avatars of developers based on abbreviations found in the file names, but whether they were intended for testing purposes, something that would have appeared in Super Paper Mario or another game entirely, has never been answered. answered. But what particularly perplexes the matter is the fact that all the levels in the data have a creation date of June 14, 2007, which is 2 months after Super Paper Mario's original Japan and US release, yet 3 months before its European and Australian release, none of which contain any of these files at all. Given the unusual creation dates, it's extremely confusing how and why all of this was worked on after the game's initial release, ended up removed in time for European and Australian distribution, and then somehow still managed to show up in the South Korean version years later. I guess we can only hope that one day someone who worked on the game will finally let the cat out of the bag. Apex Legends. Thanks to Miles Rilan for submitting this discovery through Oddheader.com. Apex Legends is a hugely popular free-to-play battle royale first-person shooter where players battle each other as different legends in a race to be the last one standing. One such legend is Pathfinder, a robot who's been described as a picture of optimism, a happy-go-lucky bot who always sees the bright side in everything no matter the predicament, which is why it was extremely unusual when Miles was playing and heard a particular line from Pathfinder he'd never expected to hear from the normally cheery droid.
Asking, I'm just a robot, standing in front of a loser, asking them to die.
I'm just a robot standing in front of a loser, asking them to die. Damn, that's pretty harsh for such an easygoing guy like Pathfinder. Even stranger, Miles wasn't playing as Pathfinder at all when he heard the line and managed to find 2 other videos on YouTube of the same exact thing happening to other players.
I'm just a robot, standing in front of a loser, asking them to die.
Additionally, while an Apex Legend leaker looked through all the data that could of the game, they couldn't find the unusual Pathfinder audio anywhere in the files, leaving it a complete mystery what set Pathfinder off as he randomly decided to demolish these players despite being the last character anyone expected to lay such a smackdown.
I'm just a robot, standing in front of a loser, asking them to die.
Damn, take it easy. Mortal Kombat 4. Thanks to Zacharias Mitchell for submitting this to me on the Oddheader Twitter. Be sure to follow me there for more mystery updates. Mortal Kombat 4 was the first 3D Mortal Kombat, released in 1997 in arcades before being ported to consoles a year later and gaining controversy for supposedly being more ultra-violent than any Mortal Kombat before, and also remembered for its particularly brutal game over screen. 16 years later in 2013, hacker Abyssus was messing around with the game using the MAME emulator, when it noticed there were character bios in the data of the 1.0 version of the game that were disabled from appearing in game, despite them not normally showing up in the game until version 2.1. Turning the character bios on, Abyssus was surprised they revealed an unexpected hidden history behind these murderous foes that had never seen the light of day. For the savage Scorpion, the description reveals, he grew up on a farm in Wickamoo, Pennsylvania. When his best friend punched him in the neck, he vowed to find him and show him that was not satisfactory behavior. Never realized Scorpion was such a man of principle. Liu Kang's bio unnervingly reveals, Liu Kang is just a nice guy in general. He supports his local fire and police department and donates a large percentage of his income to local charities. Stand-up guy, that Liu Kang. Fujin, referred to as Wind God here, apparently was always embarrassed because his mom made him wear his hair in a ponytail. Now he's got quite an attitude. Okay, it sounds like the Mortal Kombat 4 fighters aren't really the sadist monstrous brutes that they want us to believe. Nevertheless, as embarrassing as some of these may be for whoever worked on this to be shown on public display here all these years later, none of these managed to compare the unintentional embarrassment that's the endings on the N64 version.
Wait! This is brutality! You can't do it! Wrong, Derek. This is not a brutality. This is a fatality.
Nocturne. Nocturne is a 1999 action-adventure survival horror title developed by Terminal Reality, the classic PC gaming studio perhaps most remembered on the channel for the awkward discoveries found in the games Blood Rain and the original 2000 Blair Witch. Nocturne was a huge influence for both games, as Blood Rain was originally developed as Nocturne 2, and Blair Witch features the same characters from Nocturne who work at a secret government organization called Spook House that investigates supernatural mysteries across the country. Radion Raskolnikov was playing through the classic title when he decided to crawl through the files to look for a way to increase the game's shadow resolution, when suddenly he noticed something he was never expecting to find. Using the Nocturne editor mod, he extracted the act1.pod file from the game and found the script file for a Castle 1 in the world folder, when he noticed there were mentions of a sexy Easter egg in the code. Radion quickly loaded up the map and using the same editor tool was able to find multiple triggers scattered across the level, including something in the middle of this room called cheat. Radion unfortunately wasn't able to properly figure out the Easter egg, and it's unclear if it still can be properly activated or was ever meant to be seen at all. But fortunately, Radion was able to hack it in by deleting Easter egg sex ampersand in the code. And when he went into this room, found another discovery completely in line with Terminal Reality's track record. While I do have to censor this scene for nudity, there's not a whole lot going on here that the code would imply. She's really just lying there while the other two watch, but there is an inordinate amount of detail in the nudity that certainly demonstrates someone really spent some energy on this. Well, we'll leave him to it, I guess. Someone over there at Terminal Reality was thirsty. The Sims 2 Pets. Thanks to Kide for submitting this discovery on Oddheader.com. Pets is an expansion pack to The Sims 2 which allows players to own and raise cats, dogs, birds, and hamster-like creatures called worm rats, with this being the only time I've ever heard a rodent being referred to as a worm rat. TV Vicky Sins on Tumblr revealed that there's a hidden unused texture in the data for a fried worm rat skin that looks exactly like what you'd expect the rodent to look like if it had an unfortunate accident with a fryer. Some believe it might have been a reference to putting a hamster in a microwave. That was actually something you could do as an Easter egg in LucasArts' classic Maniac Mansion, which interestingly, putting a hamster in a microwave has long been rumored to be the reason microwaves were invented, supposedly invented by a British scientist in the 1950s looking for a way to humanely unfreeze rodents, which, as crazy as that sounds, is actually true. It wasn't widely known until YouTuber Tom Scott unearthed that research from old scientific journals in 2021. So while putting hamsters in the microwave is the unfortunate reason we may have microwave popcorn, why a fried worm rat texture is heightened in The Sims 2 Pets is unfortunately a question we're just going to have to live with. Cry of Fear. Thanks to BNon for submitting this through Oddheader.com. 2012's Cry of Fear is a free-to-play horror first-person shooter available on Steam that answers the question of what a Silent Hill game would look like if it was made with the original Half-Life engine. The game's stressful gameplay, freaky atmosphere, and disturbing themes has made it a hit among horror fans, though nothing in the game could be more disturbing than what BNon revealed to me is hidden on one of the textures in the game. As in Chapter 6 at the Asylum, the main character receives a flashlight that has some text on it that's normally obscured by the game's dark light in the player character's hand. However, if we were to get a closer look at the flashlight, we would see on one side it actually says Team Saw Solar, which is a reference to the name of the developer. But if we look at this side of the flashlight, it says Cock and Ball Torture. The why? Of course, that doesn't really compare to this side of the flashlight where for some reason it says Joe Biden Cock and Ball Torture. Excuse me? Now you could be wondering, is this something written by one of your uncles on Facebook about the current US president? This was actually put here in 2012 by a Swedish team when Biden was vice president, not much of a political target. Not that he wasn't a target at all. Still, why this Swedish developer in 2012 appears to be fond of inflicting a specific kind of torture on a specific part of Joe Biden's body is something I'd rather not think about. Dragon Ball Z Infinite World. Thanks to Madeline for submitting this discovery on the Oddheader Discord. Dragon Ball Z Infinite World is a fighting game with characters from the popular anime TV series, released only on PlayStation 2 in 2008. In between fights, players can watch Goku during the load screens climb Corn Tower, a tower from the series that a wise cat named Corn lives atop, which is actually a minigame where you try to get Goku to the top where Corn knocks him back down. The load screen normally lasts no longer than 8 seconds before the game loads into the next segment, unless you're playing with a scratch disc and or a broken PlayStation 2, as many players who try to boot up the game with a scratch disc or on consoles with a bad disc reader ended up playing the loading screen for way longer than they were supposed to, when suddenly hundreds of endless corns start raining from off screen. What the? That's a lot of corns. Which for some unexplained reason this only happens after waiting on this loading screen for nearly 5 minutes, which we only determined because my friend and hacker Slippy Slides managed to prevent the game from loading with some crafty hacking. I mean, unless you hacked it like him. This would be a truly impossible thing to see unless again you had a scratch disc or a broken console. I'm gonna have to try this myself, which shouldn't be too hard considering what I last did to my PlayStation 2. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. And if you know of any more discoveries in video games that weren't meant to be found, submit through Oddheader.com, come join the Discord, or even send me a shout through Twitter or Reddit. And thanks to my friend and YouTuber Slippy Slides who started helping me out with the videos. He's been a huge help with the channel and it's been an enormous step for production. Definitely give him a sub and of course here as well if you haven't already. It doesn't seem like much, but it really does go a long way. I also want to give a shout out to my producer and fiance Cassie. She's always amazing and helps with every aspect of the channel. I couldn't do any of this without her. I'm endlessly thankful for everyone being along this odd and crazy ride with me. Shout out to Alexander Knight, Angel the Fox, Ash Photography, Andrew FM, Chad Biscuits, Dear Mid Crowley, Grow Ups, Ed Moffat, Eddie Talkspin the Bleach Primid, Fox M Cloud 123, Galax Opry, Leo Maurer, Miss Arctic Foxy, Rackman 22, Riley S, Robert Eisenman, Scarities, Starcore 2, Sneaking J, Taryn Stock, Towerizer, Vincent, and Jan Banier for their Patreon support. Stay tuned.